This is right where the community kitchen was at Yellow Thunder Camp back in the early 80s. There could have been over 300 people here at any given time back then. And then this creek, we renamed it just like the camp, Yellow Thunder Creek, after Raven Yellow Thunder, who was killed by non-Indians down in Nebraska. And just like when it usually happens, the law, courts, they knew nothing about it, even though everyone knew who did it, and they were obviously guilty, but they got away with it. And that's why this camp was named after them. After Raymond Yellow Thunder, but about after all of them, really. A lot of people have forgotten about this camp. It's 2011 now, and it's been about 30 years. I came here in 1981. I was 19 that summer. There were over 150 people living here when I came here. Most of them weren't staying for a long time, but that's about what we figured that it was that time. There were other camps in the Black Hills that sprang up, but they didn't last for as long. Yellow Thunder Camp did a lot to help Indian people relearn to respect the land and their culture and their ancestors after having all that beat out of us for about 100 years prior to that. And then even though most people missed it, it taught us a lot about politics and about the law too, even though people didn't seem to catch on. If you stood on the sacred pipe, and if you stood on your inherent rights as indigenous people or as an indigenous person, or even if you stood on the treaties, like the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty, that's more relevant and the one people should be thinking about, not the later one. If you stand on those things, they can't do nothing. They offered the Lakota Oyate billions of dollars for Kaisapa, for these Black Hills, money that was never taken. Now, if you offer to buy something from somebody and they refuse to sell it to you, then it still belongs to them. They threatened us, the Pennington County Sheriff's Department and U.S. Marshal Service, vigilante groups, all kind of people threatened us, but we stood our ground. They couldn't do nothing. A lot of people wanted to go through this, stick with this special use permit from the Forest Service and try to play their game, but that was a weakness. Our biggest weakness was having somebody controlling the press and controlling the bank account that was more concerned with his own personal gains rather than the Yellow Thunder Camp and the people that were actually living here. That individual just visited now and then. And that's what the truth is. That's what brought it down. When we stood strong and we stood on the Chinoopa and on the treaty, then they couldn't touch us. They couldn't do nothing with us. And then when we start letting petty little things get in the way of that, that's when it fell apart. If anything like this ever comes up again, it has to be Xchewichasha, just normal, common people, not no bullshit AIM leader who's just out to line his pockets and make a name for himself. It's got to be all of the people coming together, not playing the Americans' game, but sticking by Wolakota, by the treaties, and then most important of all, by inherent indigenous rights. Is that something that's even stronger, more relevant, more important than treaties? A treaty is an agreement between two people, and it's supposed to be a binding law. But inherent indigenous right is unquestionable. You can't. There's no loopholes, no way out of that. You just stand on what's right, and then also your God-given right as a human being of this earth counts for something. That's another thing that people never seem to think about. And I had a lot of friends from here back in the early and mid 80s when I lived here that are gone now, and it's kind of a lonely feeling sometimes. Just like coming here and seeing this camp, every place someone could pull off the road, they're throwing garbage. A few years ago, I pulled a computer out of the creek right down below here. There's just all kind of garbage all over the place here. It's a total lack of respect for a place that was really important to a lot of people. A lot of people tried to blame Yellow Thunder Camp for being open to everyone, and there's a lot of fights on the reservation and kind of non-Indians going into sweats and ceremonies, even going to sundances, participating at sundances. Some people say that the blame rests on Yellow Thunder Camp, but Grandpa Fool's Crow told us that this is a holy place and that we can't turn anybody away, and that we have to treat everybody equal, and we have to love and respect all mankind. That's what Fool's Crow told us. That's what Tesawi said when she brought that first pipe to the people, and that was going on before Yellow Thunder Camp anyway, so that's kind of unfair to blame those problems on us. If people would just look back at Yellow Thunder Camp and see what happened, and see how much strength we have when we stand together, when we stand on the treaty, when we stand on our indigenous rights as being the real caretakers or landowners of this entire hemisphere, then they can't do nothing. You pray, you treat people with respect, and even though you threaten the American government or these other colonies around here, you stand on what's right, you believe in yourself, and you conduct yourself in a good way, and there's nothing that they can do. There's a lot of things that people could learn about Yellow Thunder Camp, but for some reason it seems to be the most well-kept secret in our recent history, our history of resistance against these invading forces. Maybe it's because most of the Indian people have joined them and co-opted, just like most of the AIM leaders did. Maybe that's why they don't want to remember this, because they don't want to cut against the grain and anger the white man. But this here is a beautiful place that's gone to ruin. And even if nobody wants to live here or do something like this anymore, then at the very least you need to teach your children and your grandchildren what Yellow Thunder Camp stood for and what we learned through our struggles here. Amatakos.